Shortly before noon on March 4th, 1801, the President-elect of the United States departed the Capitol Hill boarding house known as Conrad and McMunn's, where he occupied the lowest seat at the dinner table. Dispensing with horse-drawn carriages, Thomas Jefferson walked up New Jersey Avenue to the site of his inauguration as the nation's third president and the first to be chosen from the political opposition. And that, again, we take for granted today, but it's an extraordinary thing in the world of 1800. It was remarkable enough in 1796, 1797, that the Republic survived George Washington. That was the first test. And then a man without Washington's charisma, without his unique status and standing and clout, i.e. John Adams, could govern, however tumultuously, for 4 years. In many ways, a much greater test was posed in 1800. Could there be a peaceful transfer of authority from one political party to the next? And that's what makes the revolution of 1800 revolutionary. His predecessor was nowhere to be seen that morning, since John Adams had boarded a pre-dawn coach for the first leg of his long journey back to Quincy. This was to be a family habit, as you know. John Quincy Adams boycotted Andrew Jackson's inauguration in 1829. The new president's inaugural address was heard by few in the Senate chamber. There's a reason the State of the Union address for more than 100 years was not delivered by the president. It was written by the president and delivered by a clerk, first in the House of Representatives and then in the Senate. That's not what Washington and Adams had done. They had delivered it in person. Jefferson stopped that custom, and it's a testament to I suppose, the status that Jefferson enjoyed, that for more than 100 years his custom prevailed. There were two reasons. The stated reason was that he thought it was smacked too much of royal affectation for the president to be taken in a coach to Congress to stand there and deliver, in effect, the speech from the throne. The real reason was Jefferson hated public speaking, and he spoke in such a soft voice. The people who were there for the inaugural address said he couldn't be heard beyond the second row. In any event, the address was read, if not heard, by multitudes who were eager for any sign of radical change. They looked in vain. Jefferson extolled state governments, public economy, freedom of religion and the press, the last a none too thinly veiled reference to the hated Alien and Sedition Acts, whose victims he was quick to pardon. Beyond this, the new president sounded notes of reconciliation. "We have been called by different names, brethren of the same principle," he declared. "We are all Republicans. We are all Federalists." Much less startling was his closing passage, in which he called for, quote, "a wise and frugal government, which shall restrain men from envying one another, which shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned." This is the sum of good government. That's the Jefferson credo, as close to what we would call today libertarianism as any American president ever. And it wasn't just words. Jefferson absolutely believed that his election represented a mandate for profound change. A lot of that was stylistic, as well as legislative or substantive. There are wonderful accounts in which a shocked British minister to the United States recounts calling on the president at the White House, and Jefferson opened the door himself. Jefferson would answer the White House door, and he was wearing apparently a somewhat soiled day coat and carpet slippers. Needless to say, he wasn't interested in impressing the British minister, and he did not. He also did something rather radical. He was the first president to shake hands. A small thing now, but it wasn't seen as a small thing then. Remember, Washington and Adams and this whole generation. We were all offshoots of Great Britain. The presidency was a kind of sort of democratic monarchy. The emphasis, monarchy under Washington and Adams, and democratic, certainly under Jefferson. Among his earliest initiatives was the abolition of the hated whiskey tax and the closing of embassies in Lisbon, Berlin, and The Hague. He cut military spending 50%. The army was reduced to 3,000 men. All this in line with his credo, if we can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of them, they must be happy. Well, so much for consistency. Because no mind in American political history better illustrates the U-turns of which the politician is capable. Among the principles for which Jefferson had staged his revolution was a fervent attachment to liberty and a corresponding distrust of presidential aggrandizement. In modern parlance, he was the strictest of constructionists. But he was also a nationalist, a patriot, and a visionary. And yes, a bit of a chauvinist, who imagined a continental United States as the fulfillment of destiny, what he called an empire of liberty. At the start of Jefferson's presidency in 1801, 2 out of every 3 Americans lived within 50 miles of the ocean their forebears had crossed. Only 4 roads crossed the Appalachians. Beyond the Mississippi lay a vast, unexplored domain extending from the Gulf of Mexico to the frozen wastes of British North America, Canada. No sooner was this huge area ceded to Napoleon's France by Spain than Jefferson set his sights on the city of New Orleans, through which almost half of all the commercial traffic affecting the United States even then passed. He didn't want to buy Louisiana. He wanted to buy New Orleans. Remember that. Congress, reluctantly, authorized the expenditure of up to $2 million with which to purchase New Orleans and modern-day Florida, another Spanish territory that everyone regarded as a total wasteland, sort of the Alaska of its day. In April 1803, the long-stalled talks took a surprising turn. With England and France at war, Napoleon needed cash. So he astonished the American negotiators by offering to sell not a single river port on the Mississippi, but the entire Louisiana territory for $15 million cash on the barrelhead. In exchange for 828,000 square miles, doubling the size of the United States, by the way, at 3 cents an acre, and a virtual hammerlock on the rest of the continent, Jefferson readily dismissed his strict constructionist views of the Constitution as, in his words, so many metaphysical subtleties. Tell a modern president, next time you want to, sort of read my lips, so many metaphysical subtleties. Not everyone welcomed the deal. According to the Boston Columbian Sentinel, Louisiana was nothing but, quote, a great waste, a wilderness unpeopled with any beings except wolves and wandering Indians. It was purchased, said the newspaper, so that lordly Virginia could continue to dominate the Union and depress New England land values. Well, it was actually purchased for more personal reasons than that. As I said earlier, Jefferson was much more of a scientist than he was a political scientist. That is no exaggeration. While he was serving as minister from the United States to France in the 1780s, the future president published the only book he ever wrote, called Notes on the State of Virginia. I recommend it to you. It's extraordinary. A comprehensive description of the flora and fauna of the Commonwealth in which he grew up. The book provoked heated debate among scientists over the size of European versus American animals. Letting his patriotism get the best of his science, Jefferson insisted that the American moose stood so tall that a reindeer could walk under his belly.